We are here in the Cotswolds to see this, the Volvo ES90, a luxury E-segment saloon car. We've never featured this car on the channel before, so this is our opportunity to get all up close and personal. And you might be thinking, who on earth is this car for? Well, that is what we're endeavouring to find out today as we try and avoid curbing any of these wheels on the Cotswold potholes. Welcome to Everything Electric Cars.
Our 3 free YouTube channels on EVs and clean energy tech are funded by our fun-packed test drive-tastic events in the UK and Australia. Next up, Everything Electric Greater London, and then Sydney. All events include a B2B EV day and commercial vehicles too. And now, back to the episode.
Full disclosure, I should confess that I'm not the biggest saloon fan. So for this, the Volvo ES90 is going to have to work pretty hard to win me over. Earlier this year, I went to see the Volvo EX90. I adored that car, and that for me really is the benchmark to which I'm comparing this. But as an E-segment car, it's huge. This is the same architecture that underpins the EX90 and also the Polestar 3, not small cars by any means. And so the design is all about sort of disguising that size, trying to make it look a little bit more sleeker than it actually is. And I can't help but feel that when I have a look at this, I'm so reminded of the Polestar 2, but a Polestar 2 that's indulged a bit over Christmas. That for me is always where I'm going to have a little bit of a sticking point. But that being said, I still think it looks very elegant, it looks very classy. And actually, we had a little presentation. They said that some of these lines, they have inspiration from a yacht. And certainly if I owned this car, I'd also like to be reminded of my yacht. It's nice to be reminded if you have a yacht. Now, coming round to the rear, it's a very boxy end. This is very deliberate because it needs that boat-tailing effect, all in the name of aerodynamics. But it is square and boxy, and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. It has these C-shaped lights, which I quite like because they're sort of like lobster claws or crab claws. But the boot is remarkably enormous. In here, we have 424 litres, so not modest by any means. And of course, you can fold all of those seats forward as well, and that will give you a little bit more. Disappointingly though, you lift up this floor and we see a lot in cars that you have an enormous space under there to hide all your secret things. And this one, it's pretty small, and we have a fairly sizable lip. And I'm sure for taller people, you will never come across that as a problem, but for slightly shorter people, lifting a suitcase up and then plonking it down is a bit annoying and can sort of risk damaging the external lip of the boot. But a big boot, we won't complain about that. And we are driving in pursuit of an environment in which this car can feel totally at home amongst other fancy cars. And I know that I'm being somewhat facetious, and it's only because this is an incredibly large, incredibly expensive car at the end of the day. And here on the show, we are all about things that are super practical for your life, super affordable, and ideally the smaller and the more efficient, the better. But there is no question that there almost certainly will be a circumstance in which this is the most practical car. Especially, for example, if you and your partner are both 6'7" and you have 6'7" triplets. Perfect, without question, the most practical car that you could be looking for. Now, the other thing I will say though, is that if you are indeed in pursuit of an enormous car, it is more efficient to go for a saloon than it is to go for an enormous SUV. By their nature, saloons have a more efficient shape, they can reach better drag coefficients, they're going to use energy in a much more efficient way. So if big is your flavour, then go for a saloon. Now, on the subject of efficiency, this has a drag coefficient of 0.25 compared to something like the Mercedes EQE with a drag coefficient of 0.22. Now, this higher number is because it has a slightly higher stance, it's borrowing that SUV-ness a little bit while still being a saloon. That is quite helpful because I cannot see to the end of this bonnet even though I'm sitting a little bit higher up. That seems to be a bit of a problem when you first get into this car and you're manoeuvring in car parks. Yes, all of the aids are absolutely there to help you, but it is difficult to get a sense of just how enormous you are in those smaller spaces. However, as soon as you get out on the road, it has a feeling of a remarkably small car. I am completely forgetting the fact that this is 5 meters long. It feels very agile, it feels totally capable in these very small roads. But then you have the feeling of, well, if it's only me in this car and it feels really small, what on earth was the point of having such an enormous car? But again, I am aware. I'm being totally facetious. Now, I am quite upset to be doing this, but I am going to be referring to my notes on my phone in the spirit of accuracy. This is our third shoot this week. So, I always think it's interesting when you read the press material about how these cars are described. And here, the Volvo ES90, it says that it's designed for individuals seeking a life in balance. Blending the refined elegance of a sedan with the adaptability of a fastback and the spaciousness of an SUV. Bit of a word salad there, but what it distills down to is that this is fancy and it is very, very long and very, very big. It's 5 meters long. Of course it is, that's the kind of rough size that you get in an E segment. But 5 meters is 3 of me. If I was to lie down 3 times, that is the length of this car. And because it's big, it's going to come with some very impressive numbers. So we are in here today, the single motor extended range version. That has a range of 411 miles or 662 kilometers. That all comes from a 92 kilowatt hour battery. Very, very big. And because of the 800 volt architecture, which we love, you get very fast charging. So 10 to 80% in 22 minutes, all thanks to 350 kilowatt DC charging. When you look up at the twin motor and the twin motor performance, those numbers get even more staggering. We're talking 106 kilowatt hour batteries, 426 miles of range, again that 22-minute charging time, but power up to 700 kilowatts. That seems mad. Here we've got a rear motor which will deliver 245 kilowatts. Now, if you are genuinely looking at this vehicle, then you're probably also looking at the BMW i5 and the Mercedes EQE. And the stats are rather similar, although this absolutely knocks out of the park with regards to range and also charging speed, again, thanks to their 800 volt architecture. Similar price-wise, so starting at around £67,000, but going up all the way to £86,000. So it's not cheap. It definitely isn't cheap. It's definitely not pretending to be so. Now, all of this setup here, all of this tech, so the screen that I have in front of me with a minimal amount of information, the head-up display, and also the big screen here, is all very similar to the Polestar 3. And of course it is, because they sit on exactly the same platform. And it works brilliantly. It's super fast. This all sits on the Sept tech stack, which means that it's all powered by NVIDIA. Everything works very quickly. And not only does it work very quickly, but it's continually updating, so it will only improve over the car's lifetime as well. But there are certain things which I just wish existed as physical buttons. So for example, one pedal drive, you can turn on and off by pressing a button in the screen, which then means that I need to look down there instead of just finding a button on the wheel. Equally, if you do need to change any further settings, in opening up the menus that you then hide your maps, which again, I just find a little bit distracting. But given that you've got a head-up display, maybe that's not so much of a problem. So we've come to Daylesford, affectionately known as Selfridges in the field, to make this car feel very at home. And we've been given this envelope by the really lovely team at Volvo in this mulberry red colour. And whilst we've got a sand dune colour, they also have this car in mulberry red. And in here is £10 to ensure that we can get a little bit of lunch whilst we're out and about filming this car. So we're going to see what we can get in Daylesford for £10. So we spent our £10 extremely wisely, because we didn't manage just to get just one, not even two, but 3 hot cross buns. And not only that, we still got £1 change, so £3 per hot cross bun. Make of that what you will. But in securing our goods, it also gives a perfect excuse to demonstrate the frunk. Now, when a frunk is done well, I'm a big fan of a frunk. It's a lovely place to have a cable. When done badly, just don't bother. And I think that's sort of what we have going on here today. So I need to find the little catch. Right, there we go. And you will see a little frunk, little tiny frunk, but perfect for our hot cross buns. So a couple of notes on the interior, and it is worth pointing out that we are in the base level spec of this, and if you're willing to part with an additional £20,000, you can definitely spec it to have a slightly more plush interior. But as it is, the material's good. I love this kind of wood finish. The seats, we've got lots of recycled materials, no dramas there. Cup holders, fabulous, space charged phones, brilliant. There's also this lovely little shelf behind the screen, and the volume knob, which on the EX60, I was like, ooh, I like that, that's something from the future. In this slightly more serious setting, it suddenly looks a little bit more gimmicky. It's a minor thing. But the thing I am kind of struggling with is just how overwhelmingly enormous this screen is. And yes, it has so much functionality and it's really fast and all the rest of it. The whole kind of Scandi aesthetic is around creating a space that more closely resembles a well-designed home than, say, a traditional car. And everything feels very well considered, and then you have this enormous screen, and it's almost like having a lovely home, but then dedicating an entire wall to a plasma TV. And it's fine when it's very clean, but very quickly you start to see your fingerprints. And it is annoying because it means then you focus on that rather than see the other more pared back, refined elements. But equally, it is very useful, and I can even open the glove box by pressing that button there. Well, as you can very clearly see, there is oodles of space here. So much space, in fact, that I can just about straighten my legs. You are not going to be complaining about the amount of rear leg room. However, there could be a couple of things that you might be complaining about. First of all, if you are longer in the leg department, you might end up with your knees quite high. That's kind of obvious because this car is pretty low down, the seats are pretty low down. But if you are more used to an SUV, that may come as a bit of a surprise. There isn't a rear seat pocket, which from a practicality perspective is fine because we've got huge door pockets. But from a visual perspective, it almost looks like these seats just forgot to put on their trousers. There's something very, very clearly missing. But it's not the end of the world. It certainly isn't a game changer. All of the seats here have the ability to heat and cool, which you can twiddle there, and there are USB-C ports. And if you go skiing, which you almost certainly do if you have this car, we can pop our skis just there. What has been really nice about this drive, these roads are not the smoothest. We're in the Cotswolds, there's a lot of farm traffic, so there's mud on the road, there are various potholes, there are varying degrees of narrow. And yet this car is just sailing. It is so smooth as it glides across them. And there's been a lot of focus on the dual chamber suspension, and we're feeling that very acutely. It's lovely. That smoothness of the drive is perfectly complemented by just how quiet it is in here. And I think what happens when a cabin is so quiet that the scenery almost seems like you're watching it in a film. It can feel a bit more dreamlike. It's very, very relaxing, very, very calming. And if you were, a high-flying business person who was very stressed and needed to be chauffeured around whilst dealing with all manner of emails, I think this would have a very calming effect. And that is impressive given just the volume of glass that there is, the enormous panoramic roof, and obviously windows as well. It's very impressive that they've been able to achieve that quietness whilst also contending with that large amount of glass. Something that's become very clear as we've been driving is that all of the ADAS features are on. So things like lane keep assist, speed monitoring, attention monitoring, all that kind of stuff. And yet, it has been so unobstructive, no annoying bings or bongs. And rather sort of blaring them in your face saying, please stop driving so fast, it's been more of a, excuse me, madam, going a little bit quickly, please refrain. And it feels so intentional. And when it is unobstructive, you can tell that so many hours and thought has gone into that design, rather than no thought at all, and that's what happens when you get something that feels aggressive and annoying. And as such, it means that you're less likely to turn them off, which fundamentally is probably going to make you a safer driver. So nice. Well done, Volvo. Well, as we have seen, this car is right at home here in the Cotswolds amongst its other fancy car friends. Although we do see many more SUVs than saloon cars these days. And I think that's the thing. If you are in the market for a great big car, do consider a saloon instead of an SUV, all in the pursuit of a higher miles per kilowatt hour. Now, a fun fact that is worth mentioning about this car is that it has a total carbon footprint of 31 tonnes of CO2 equivalent over its lifetime. That drops to 26 tonnes if you charge it entirely from renewable energy, which means that it has a 50% lower carbon footprint than a mild hybrid S90. That's pretty good. That is so worth remembering. But that's all to say that this is a good car. Of course it is. It's a luxury Volvo. We would expect absolutely nothing less. But it manages to be very refined, to exude that understated luxury without needing to rely on blingy and flashy bits and pieces. It's a good car. But as ever, do let us know what you think in the comments. Please do like and subscribe. And if you have been, thank you for watching.